No.
We are.
What I asked you about, should we print special I put on. I'm going to say that. I did 2 months all there. Really got 2
How long have I got left? Well, you can start without me because I have to get a confirmed on a day.
So give me eight.
Hey folks, we might as well take your seats again. We're going to start as soon as we can.
Good day. 25 past 10, this fucking thing needs rest. I want to get home and get a cup of tea.
Or what?
BBC, I'm going national.
Okay folks, I'm going to ask you all now just to take your seats.
Not just yet. Mary's bag.
Okay folks, I'm going to ask Gareth Greer from NIEA to come up and do his presentation. We will be lowering the lights right down for this, so please, whenever you get into your seats, if you just stay there, just for health and safety.
Point it. Can I use that?
Yep.
What's going on?
That one there, that should be it.
You have to hold it down.
Evil advance it just to give him help.
Okay, it's okay. Mary's married.
She'll be under the yours way out.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Gareth Greer from Environment
agency. I work in the water management unit. I think the clicker has given up on us, but we'll hopefully be able to move through the slides. Firstly, I just want to say thank you to Ricky and Mary for inviting us along tonight. Obviously, it's a very important issue, what's going on in Lough Neagh, and thanks for the invite, and hopefully we'll be able to set some of the records straight around. There's a lot of issues going on around Lough Neagh, and particularly around what's caused the blue-green algal bloom. So hopefully some of the information will go away towards just informing everybody of what's actually happened this year, and what the long-term issues have been around Lough Neagh. Okay, so just first of all, a little introduction to NIEA. So to protect and enhance Northern Ireland's environment, and in doing so deliver health and well-being benefits to the economy. Myself and some colleagues here tonight are from Water Management Unit, so we are specifically responsible for management and the protection of our waterways. And that includes basically all the items that you see up there. So a few people mentioned Water Framework Directive tonight. We are also responsible for pollution response side of things. We do our catchment investigations, which is specifically looking at what is going on within particular river water bodies, what is causing those issues. We're also responsible for the river basin management planning, which is part of the Water Framework Directive process, and works on a 6-year cycle. Another slide on blue-green algae. Probably don't need to go over this again. I think everybody in the room knows what it is by now. Obviously, cyanobacteria, it's not an algae, so we just need to keep remembering that it's a bacteria itself. It's been present for millennia. The toxins, or the cyanobacteria that we're seeing in Lough Neagh this year, microcystis, has been observed in Lough Neagh going back over a century now. So the algae has been there, the blooms haven't in the past. The conditions for them to form, it's been mentioned before, we need sufficient water temperature, we need sufficient levels of nutrients, we need bright sunlight. A lot of those things came together this year, and also a bit more detail on that as we go through the next slide or two. Blooms can occur throughout the year. You saw some of the other slides from America that happened later on in the year. A lot of that is related to the conditions of the lake itself in terms of temperatures and the nutrient conditions at different times of the year. And as we mentioned before, when blooms start to decompose, you can get these odor issues as we've all been observed and noticed around the loch this year. Just a few pictures, obviously, from taken around the loch. Probably everybody has seen these, and you've all seen it yourself, probably up close as well, just what it looks like. So, can vary in colour, from a dark green, brown colour. Sometimes when it starts to decompose, you get this bright blue effect coming as well. So, essentially, this is what we're seeing on the loch. You probably recognise some of these locations on the loch also. Map of reports for this year. So these is all of the locations that blue-green algae has been reported in Northern Ireland this year. We've had, I know the map says 3rd of September, but as of last week, we had 167 reports of blue-green algae in Northern Ireland. The vast majority of them are obviously around the shores of Lough Neagh. But as you can see, we also have, skip back 1 minute. We've also had reports down on the Erne system, Lough Melvin, and some of the other smaller lakes around the country where algal blooms have occurred in the past, and blue-green algal blooms also. So the conditions this year in terms of temperature and sunlight has allowed blooms in other areas to develop also. As you can see, Lough Neagh has been the primary location for reports this year, and then as you can see, it's tracked down the lower Bann and also onto the beaches on the north coast, where the first time ever it's been recorded moving that far down the Bann system. Again, just another little slide to identify, just to reiterate the extreme level of algae reports we've had this year. So over close to 75% of all reports in the last 5 years have been received this year in 2023. Okay, so what's happened a lot there this year? A lot of factors that came together. We'll go through a couple of those now. So we have high nutrient levels. It's been discussed before. Lough Neagh has had high nutrient levels for a long time. That is one of the requirements for blooms to occur. We have year, and zebra mussels have been talked about a little bit before, but zebra mussels are improving water clarity in Loch Ness, and we shouldn't confuse water clarity with good water. You know, the nutrients are still there. If the water is clear, then that will allow algal blooms to dominate. We've had high water temperatures. During this year, our AFBI colleagues have reported the highest ever average temperature in Loch Ness. So the average for the month was 17.4 degrees. So those things coming together have allowed what has happened in the bottom line there. So what has been noticed has been a switch in the dominant taxa of blue-green algae. So we have had blue-green algae blooms most years in Loch Ness out away from the shoreline, below the surface. That dominant taxa is called Planktothrix, and it actually doesn't need that much bright sunlight, which is why it doesn't come to the top. It has stayed further down in the water column, which is why Loch Ness a lot of the times looks that darker murky colour. But what has happened this year with these conditions coming together, the water was clear, the water was still, and that allowed another strain of cyanobacteria and microcystis to dominate, and that is what we're all experiencing across the loch today. Just a couple of pictures there of what we are used to. The Planktothrix, it's a filamentous cyanobacteria, so it forms long string. The microcystis, you can just about make out, it's a cell, so it forms colonies. So what has happened this year is the conditions in the loch has allowed the microcystis to take advantage of those nutrient levels, the bright sunlight and the water temperature improved to come up to the surface and dominate the entire bloom for this year, and that is what has happened on the loch this year. Just a wee bit about Loch Ness history. Mentioned about Water Framework Directive. So after the first revision cycle in 2015, Loch Ness was classified, and if you look at the very bottom line there, the overall surface water status is classified as bad. So it's basically the lowest classification that you can have in terms of water quality. One of the key issues for driving phytoplankton blooms is the level of phosphorus. So that's TP, total phosphorus, and that has consistently been at bad status. So we've known for a lot longer than Water Framework Directive's been going that there's too much nutrient in Loch Ness. Just got a few slides now, just looking at that sort of history of nutrients. I talked about the average phosphorus levels. So these are the plots of the annual average phosphorus levels within the loch. So you can see, you know, back in '83 started to rise up, and the last number of years it's been consistent at that high level. It's probably worthwhile taking a little bit of explaining on this one. It's essentially, this is a piece of work that's been undertaken by our AFBI in Queen's as part of James Thompson's PhD. But I think it helps demonstrate really what's been going on for the loch for quite a long time now. So you see this graph starts back in the early 1970s. The red line is the amount of phosphorus coming into Loch Ness, and the blue line is the amount of phosphorus that is being measured in Loch Ness. So you can see for a long time what was coming into the loch was higher than what was in the loch itself. When we get to mid-2000s, they start to equalise, so that level of phosphorus within the loch has risen up. The actual loading of phosphorus itself coming in from the catchment has stayed fairly static. It hasn't increased massively, but it is still too high. And what that means is that, you know, in terms of recovery for the loch, for as long as those loadings coming into the loch stay at a high level, it's going to take a long time for the loch to recover in terms of nutrient levels. The line is going across at 80%, 40%, and 10%. That's taken from published literature, which estimates the likelihood of a cyanobacteria bloom happening at those levels of phosphorus. So you can see we are consistently around at and above the 80% chance of a bloom happening in any one year if we continue to have phosphorus levels in the loch at the levels that we're having at the minute. I said there originally that phosphorus levels coming in hadn't increased significantly. This graph here shows the level of nitrogen coming in. So we've seen from 2019 onwards, from the rivers coming into Loch Ness, we have seen an increase in nitrogen. So again, that was one of the reasons that has driven the blooms in the last year, as well as that increase in nitrogen. While the phosphorus hasn't changed significantly in the loch, it is still too high. Nitrogen has increased in the last couple of years, and that's something that DAERA, AFBI and NIA will all be taking a big look at to see what's been potentially driving that change in the last few years. I hope you can make the colours out of this. This is looking at across the country in terms of nitrate in rivers. This came part of a report that was published a couple of years ago. So essentially where you can see those orange lines, the orange arrows that are pointing upwards, that is where we're seeing an increase in nitrate levels in the rivers. Anywhere that's yellow or amber colour is essentially staying static. But you can see in those areas where orange arrows, that's where nitrate is increasing. And if we're going to look at phosphorus in our waterways, it's much more spread across the country. We can see orange and red lines there, where we have seen the levels of phosphorus increasing across Northern Ireland in a lot of our waterways. And again, that is, as Mary was saying earlier, that is what's driving the eutrophication process in a lot of waterways and lakes. This graph here depicts the level of soluble reactive phosphorus. That's the measure that we use in terms to record the amount of phosphorus in our rivers. It was dropping from early 2000s down to 2013, 2012, and from then we've seen a steady increase again in the level of phosphorus within our waterways. In fact, it's almost a 50% rise from 2012 to 2022. And again, that is one of the key issues that we need to address. We've all seen pictures of Loch Ness up to now, and pictures around the loch, but really when we're looking to manage Loch Ness, we have to look at all of this area, because this is all the area that feeds into Loch Ness. All of these water courses, you can see they're divided up into little water bodies themselves, so each one of those has been classified in terms of how good it is in terms of water quality. What we're looking at, what we want to pick out there is anywhere that's blue and green, so those areas are deemed to have what we expect to see in terms of phosphorus levels within them. Anywhere that is yellow or amber or red, we've got too much phosphorus in those water bodies. So you can see for a significant area of the Loch Ness catchment, we've got too much phosphorus still within our water bodies. And ultimately, as everyone knows, that all feeds into Loch Ness. Apologies for the colour in this one. Next couple of slides just look at starting to get into what is causing this. Are they coming from wastewater? Is it coming from agriculture? What we look at around point source pressures are levels of ammonia, the impact on invertebrates, and also the dissolved oxygen levels within the waterways. So I think you can just make out maybe within some of the lighter yellowy colour areas, that is where we're seeing point source pressure. So those would be potential areas that are being affected by wastewater discharge or discharge coming in from a package treatment plant, something like that. To come on to what we call diffuse pressure, so these aren't necessarily coming out of a pipe, this is natural background release of nutrients into our waterways. So what we do to measure diffuse pressures is the level of phosphorus that I've mentioned already. We look at diatoms, which are very microscopic plants that live within the rivers as well. And we also look at macrophytes. So all of these things respond over time, sometimes quite slowly, to levels of diffuse nutrients in those waterways. So you can see within the catchment area of Loch Ness itself, we've got a lot of those water bodies that are being affected by what we call diffuse pressures. So really getting down to where is our phosphorus coming from? What we said for Loch Ness, we've had an increase in nitrogen, but our phosphorus levels are too high. AFBI colleagues produced a report back in 2020 looking at basically the entire phosphorus flow in Northern Ireland and all of our food stock and our wastewater, and this is what they estimated to, at the end of that process, what are the key contributors to phosphorus into our waterways. So you can see the percentages there. This is across Northern Ireland as a whole, so this isn't specifically for Loch Ness. but it's quite representative of what we're seeing. Certain other catchments where you've got a lot of urban built-up areas, obviously the input from wastewater would be higher. But if we're looking at Northern Ireland as a whole, this is what we're saying in terms of where the phosphorus is coming from. So 62% is that diffuse runoff from agricultural land. We've got 24% coming from our wastewater systems, which is treated effluent heading going back into the waterways, and then septic tanks. So anywhere that's not on a main sewer line as such, or we've got septic tanks there contributing roughly 12% of the phosphorus load. A couple other points highlighted from that report. We've got a lot of phosphorus accumulated in our soils, and we can talk about previous policies of departments going back over decades about what we were asking farmers to do in their land, but we have a huge amount of phosphorus accumulated in our soils that we have to deal with. And we have to help the farming community to do that. So in terms of what we have, we've got an excess of phosphorus built up in our lands, and we can talk about some of the issues that have been brought forward to look at that. Again, nitrogen, when this report is looking at phosphorus, nitrogen is obviously still a key nutrient in terms of what has happened in the rock this year. Some discussions already about management options. Essentially they fall into two categories. You were looking at catchment control, controlling what is coming into the lake. Your other options there are in-lake management. Some of those have been discussed tonight. So they either physically interfere, they break up the surface, they basically make the conditions unsuitable for the bacteria.